So a couple of months ago, I started to realize that there's a couple of areas in the release stage where we could do a better job of coupling our users' experience together. So what I wanted to do was get together and start to detail out our release stage direction and put together some UX mocks that maybe could help paint the picture for both our users and our sales team on where we're hoping the user experience will go across the release stage, and also help kind of put some details and some thoughts as like a brainstorm between all of us in the release groups, so that we can help feed things that maybe I'm not thinking about on the release management side, or things that you're not necessarily thinking about from the release management side. I think it's probably a little easier for you, Ori, because you owned release management at one point. So you kind of understand like the context a little bit better probably than I do from a progressive delivery perspective. But I want to leave this meeting with issues created that then Dimitri and Hyana can collaborate together on creating some designs. And then Ori, you and I can work together on breaking down those pieces from a product standpoint and associating what we currently have in our backlog to feed into these experiences and potentially create new issues for our backlog. Mm-hmm. Does that sound okay?
The other really nice thing about having this stuff ready on the direction pages is that once or twice a year, we usually do like a presentation to the board on, you know, like what are we doing? And it really helps to have visualizations of that stuff. The sales team can also potentially use these directly, although we should make sure that we have some kind of disclaimer there that says these are kind of like prospective images, and, you know, you shouldn't print these out and say, you know, you promised me that you would build this thing like we do on the direction page already. But in particular for presenting the vision to the board, I think this would be super useful too.
That's a really great point, Jason. Thank you. Okay, so Ori, is there anything else that you think you'd want to accomplish out of this call, or while we have each other here?
I think we have a good place to start. Let's just go ahead.
Yeah, sounds good. So I added a section at the bottom of the page called flow. And what I wanted to sort of contextualize here is that there's an experience we can create for a user that involves GitLab embedding into their day-to-day life and their personal workflow. So for example, I receive a notification from GitLab in my email about a deployment that I need to approve. And then I click that from my email. It brings me into GitLab and navigates me to some sort of dashboard, which could be our environments dashboard redesign. And it's a pending approval for a release tag, but actually maybe it has information about the feature flags that are related to that release tag. Or perhaps maybe there's other sorts of information around alerts from a post-deployment monitoring issue. Or maybe there's what violations from a release evidence. There's a lot of directions that we can go. But the point being that we take GitLab and we create an experience that's inside that user's workflow. And I think we have a lot of things in the direction page from a release standpoint that we could do this with. Like for example, or you have on the first item, like feature flags with review apps. I think there's an opportunity to put more experience around that, and would love to hear your thoughts on your flow.
Yeah, so I did add specifically for this one a flow. I don't know if I totally understood what you were trying to accomplish, but what I wanted to say is something that we can really leverage in GitLab is review apps with feature flags, which means that as a developer, I'm developing something and I want to know what it looks like for all my users. So being able to spin up a review app and choose the user persona that I am and like see all the different variants that I can have is really, really powerful. If you connect that also to visual reviews and additional features along the way, I think this could be like one of the better features that we can really compete with that others don't have.
Yeah, I would question where can we interject more of the release management functionality into this, because this is exclusively progressive delivery. So this would be like a 3-year mock for progressive delivery rather than release. If we were to create a flow diagram for this, where else could we bring functionality from perhaps my stage into this?
So yeah, maybe not release because visual review is verify.
Right. That was my point from earlier, Ori, was that trying to reach across both of our groups and explain like how is a user going to experience both progressive delivery and release management in their workflow.
Yeah.
And like this one is a really powerful thing for progressive delivery. It doesn't really talk about release as a stage at whole to me, but I could be misinterpreting what like the breadth that this could go.
What we also think about maybe is that 3 years is quite a long time, and you can really paint a picture of, you know, like the future of release management rather than kind of like, here's the next step, and here's some mocks of what the next step is. We're not going to get to it for a while, but you know, this is what the next step is. But really, just be like, you know, create a crazy idea and you and make a screenshot of that crazy idea. And then maybe that's like a cooler way to do it. That's more evocative. And then you can work towards, you know, iteration towards that crazy idea.
Like, here's what I think. I agree with you, Jason. I was considering like the review app actually is, you know, we're getting a lot of requests from a deployment approval perspective. And if we could use the review app as a published state of what can be approved either, you know, at the director level or beyond, maybe there's like a way to aggregate review apps across multiple projects. So then the experience is they're able to see what a feature behind a feature flag is and review that as a director level across multiple projects in one go. And then that's a part of a deployment approval.
That's a cool idea. Another one that comes to mind is release managing a progressive delivery. So like, you know, a progressive delivery is going to, or he's going to build a bunch of features that are like how you control the rollout of a feature. So what does release management of that look like? Is there some kind, you could make some kind of mock of a dashboard that's, you know, the incremental rollout state of all the features in this release or something like that. That's
I love that.
Something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I actually put something below. So like if we're talking about specifically for feature flags, so today feature flags are on a project level. And sometimes you want to know like what's going on with your environment, which is like a group of projects, right? And I don't think it's visible now, but you know, if I was Marin, I would want to know everything that's on in production at the moment and just like figure that out. And right now you need to kind of pick and choose from different projects. So if we could do that in an environment dashboard view, I think that's also really helpful.
I think we're kind of chipping away at that too, which is really exciting. It's high on in our redesign of the environment dashboard, being able to visualize environments at scale. As today, it's impossible to do that. So this is, I think that there's ways to iteratively deliver that promise of release management across progressive delivery. I think that's exciting. Okay. That's
yeah, cool. And even if we take it to the next level for features that we don't have, like A/B testing. So in A/B testing, you kind of want to know what your best solution is, right? So it may be revenue, it could be performance, it could be a bunch of stuff. And if we could connect that to the dashboard that we were discussing about like DORA 4 metrics, you could basically also compare different releases or different variants in the release to see what's better for you and make like a really informed decision on which is the variant that you want to go with.
So sort of like modeling your production status and performance based off of a particular.
Well, performance is one metric, but think about it. It's so much easier to talk about revenue, okay? So if you have a website, that's your application, and your idea is how do I get more people to add stuff to their carts or make a sale at the end of the day, you actually can convert money to the decision. And you know, when I make more money, that's the variant that I'm going to choose and roll it out for everyone, right? So having that visual is awesome.
Yeah, I want to add to that for A/B testing, most participants I've currently spoken with, though, be it internal, is that they often refer to that they want one key metric they can refer to, and if that is directly derived from the experiment, that is up to the experiment setting. So, for example, say that there's a performance indicator, then they will have some matrix to connect that to SMAO or ASCV, and that is the eventual metric that they actually want to monitor. And ideally, that conversion should be automatic, so there's less bias involved in, or less manual error involved in that. So one key metric, that's the basic TLDR.
Yeah, that's
the,
also
dollar signs is difficult because you have to pull in a lot of financial data into the system that's maybe difficult to keep, but there are, if you measure conversion, for example, instead conversion on a page to whatever the activity is that they want to happen during the A/B test.
Think about, the number of items in a cart. It doesn't have to be the actual sale.
Yeah, and that's the only point I'm making is like, it will be hard to say like, and this decision made you $3,000 and this one cost you $500, because you have to pull in like how much it costs you on average for an engineer to work on a feature and all kinds of crazy things. So, but you can measure conversion and things like that more directly. And I think that ties into what you're saying too, Dimitri, that, like the key, identifying that key metric and making that visible is really, really important.
Yeah, that conversion, you will need an additional variable for that, and that is indeed derived from external data. But when you kind of focus that down and make that a static variable to work with, so say for example, so much conversion, so much views of this page, we've calculated before that converts to X amount of dollars, just saying something, putting something out there. And then with that, you can work and get to an actual result, even though it's an assumed.
I'm not sure if you chopped it out the end for me. I missed the bottom half. But
sorry. Yeah. What I did say is that the data analyst, they will, together with product managers, they will find out that a certain amount of clicks, for example, relates to a certain amount of dollars, and that variable will then be used or can then be used to convert conversion towards the actual eventual end result key metric that they want to decide on.
So,
be it dollars, be.
Oh, go ahead. My audio is being really crummy.
Oh, go ahead. I was finished.
So in my previous role, I did social media ROI. And one of the challenges that we had were these things called custom calculations. And it's that every sort of organization has a way that they want to calculate the return on investment from a conversion metric. So this is really like getting into the nitty-gritty details, but instead of bypassing like a canned report or providing a canned report out of GitLab for conversion, it may be better to like just provide custom calculations. And I'm not sure if this is something that like the analytics team is doing, but it could be a way to like set a target data set and pool that into like a formula. It's a formula builder inside of GitLab for metrics. That would save some time, but it also be able to be more flexible than what could end up being really, really challenging for us to support a bunch of canned metrics. Okay, so A/B testing seems like an interesting perspective, connecting back to DORA 4 and graded reporting in the concept of how we measure release inside of GitLab, or how we will intend to manage the impact of the release stage inside of GitLab. In our release direction, we have this enable common deployments target. Jason provided a rewrite that I think is pretty compelling, and I'll have to reconcile that with our current page because we did make updates. I snapshotted this like a couple months ago, and then we made updates to the release stage. So we may need to bring that back in. But what I wanted to talk about here was how to connect runbook, so release runbooks back to progressive delivery, is sort of tying back into what Jason was saying before about release management across incremental rollouts. Is there steps that we would want to support, or a certain use case or workflow, or how should we expect that experience to play with runbooks for users?
Well, any type of automation, which is basically what runbook does, is, you know, what we want to do when we do a deployment, right? Because we want it to be repetitive. So I think this ties in very nicely. It also defines like the who and who's not allowed to deploy something or run it. So it's really important for enterprises.
I agree. I think what I wanted to drill into was like, how do we want a user, like what's the flow that we would expect them to take advantage of common deployment targets, and how would we want them to use runbooks in that context? Does that make sense? Like maybe they use your Amazon ECS template, and in combination with that, they can use a supported runbook template inside of GitLab. So they have an option that says, go ahead.
They can even use like deploy freezes or the opposite of freeze, which I don't know what we're calling now.
Deployment windows, I think, is what we're calling it.
I'm refraining from saying, you know, white periods or black periods.
Oh God. Yes, please.
Another thing you could maybe show here is another thing you can maybe show here is like a runbook that's associated with an automated release that has things that are just like, you know, impossible to automate. So just show kind of like a runbook pop-up or something like that that's part of a automated release, but says something like coordinate with partner on press release or something like that.
Oh yeah, like link to external system kind of thing.
Yeah, then it would illustrate what you would use it for.
Yeah, and you can even add that to the audit log and see that, you know, whoever needed to do that manual step did it properly.
I love this experience. I feel like this could be super powerful, because we could then do a bunch of different like linking into other stages as well. Like a step inside of the runbook could be confirmed that there's no vulnerabilities or you know, any SAST issues. Linking back to our immense investment that we're going to expect out of 2020, we could see that impacts our 3-year vision, that we'll want to integrate that functionality more. That could be really powerful. Okay. This one's my favorite one. I'm going to put an asterisk toward it so we can talk about that some more later. That can probably be one of our flows that we'll detail.
Yeah, I also added secrets here because anything that you do there will make this so much easier.
Yeah. Anything else on runbooks that we would want to couple that you think would be differentiating for us?
I don't know if this exactly ties into runbooks, but one of Spinnaker's biggest advantages is that they bake images for the cloud providers, which is, you know, kind of copy paste, and people love it. So that may be something to look into.
What would that mean for the flow? So like here, a user is using your Amazon ECS template. They would have an automated runbook for the release of that AWS template with external steps, and that pops up the runbook step to go confirm that this step's been done.
Yeah, it could be that, but it doesn't have to, like, don't think about only the features that we have now, which is those containers or templates. We also plan on having like this template creator for cloud. So you tell them, here's the instance size that I want. Here's the database type I want. Here's the name. And it just does everything for you. So if you can connect that into the run book.
So even better, the first step then is I create my own template and then I leverage an out of the box automated release for a series of steps that GitLab provides for you. Okay. We'll want to unpack this one if this will be the flow that we want to put on our 3-year page, right? Like that one might need a little bit more details to make this connected. Okay. Any questions, Dimitri or Hyana? I know that you guys are kind of just taking it in. Okay. I can see Hyana's brain working though. Okay. Cloud deployment templates did seem like infrastructure as code to me as well for the next item. Go ahead.
For secrets, we shouldn't put anything that we're just about to release, since you'll then just kind of get stuck updating it right away. So it would have to be something that's like we can only do after a couple more years of development rather than the feature that's just come out or will just come out.
Yeah.
I guess kind of true for everything. Avoid putting just like the next thing you're going to release in any of this, because you'll have to keep updating it if you do that.
I want it to be,
if you don't do that, it will look like you're not going to deliver the thing you already delivered for another 2 or 3 years.
yeah, that's kind of why I paused a little bit on secrets, because I think that this year we're going to get it to a viable place where people can integrate with HashiCorp. And then beyond that, like you can use everything we're building for any other target key store. So it's pretty expansive. Like the increment of work that we'll be shipping will support a bunch of use cases. So I wonder if this is, I need to think about this more, because really my main focus is just getting secrets management to viable, right? So a 3-year vision.
That's not going to be true for the next 3 years, right?
Come again?
I'm saying that's your current goal is to get it to viable, but that's not true for the next 3 years. That's like for this year.
You're absolutely right. I would say that our secrets management vision is coupled with a whole other provider of product too. So that makes it, I wouldn't say limited, but it definitely, its scope is a little bit more contained than I think release orchestration or progressive delivery on the whole. It could be that we completely separate out from that and we decide to create a different experience, but that's definitely a good call out though, Jason.
By the way, a quick question regarding this point we're now discussing in total. I know we have some points to discuss still, but I think it would be helpful, at least for me and Ayana, to get a little bit of a quick summary of the flow we have in mind. Like, how does the user walk through these things instead of just like, oh, we have this feature and we got this new thing, and like how does the user go from one to the other, and how does that experience look like?
I think this is the meeting to figure that out.
Yeah, we don't know. For this particular topic, the enable common deployments, like what I'm doing right now is a process of elimination. We're going to go through all these line items and then pick the one that has the most meat that naturally connects progressive delivery and release, and then decide what user experience makes sense. We're kind of just like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks right now, and then we'll look at all the spaghetti that's stuck and work through what makes more sense. I don't know if that analogy works across non-American. That could have been a complete Americanism. Very sorry.
I can.
We all just throw spaghetti at the wall and do competition.
Yeah, oh God. I'm looking like super ignorant here. The only. Okay, so we don't really know yet, but I think by the end of this meeting, we should hopefully have an idea of which flow we want to detail, and then it's probably going to be us working asynchronously to like hammer out the actual details, and we'll need to storyboard it, because this will be, a published experience that is like our moon. Not really. It's earlier than a moonshot, so I guess atmosphere shot. Like that we're trying to go further out than our immediate vision pages right So I think we talked about common deployment targets. Ori, do you want to go over the bullet points that you had below, the cloud deployment templates and support for main cloud providers and that stuff?
So cloud deployment templates is what I mentioned before, that you can, basically enter very, very minimal information and we'll just do it for you, like the size and stuff like that. And then, support for all main providers. It's also mentioned above, so it's just a repetition, but of course, runbooks, again, they tie in really nicely because the steps are pretty much the same regardless of where you're deploying to. And in fact, lots of companies are moving into multi-cloud, so it also makes sense to have like one procedure for deployment regardless to the target itself. And then insights into CP into cloud provider billing, effects on code changes and deployments. This one is super interesting. And it ties back to that dashboard that we were discussing before, the director dashboard or similar. And this is something that I actually started working on with Dove. And it's really, one of the things that I learned from the post-deployment interviews was the fact that sometimes you want to roll back your deployment, not because something wasn't working properly or because there's errors, but because it made a spike in your charge, in your cloud provider charge. And so having this insight, per release, per deployment, per a lot of things, it gives you a lot of power to make decisions. And money is always interesting in that sense.
So is this like, would we be integrating with something like Cloud Health and maybe it allows you to model your Cloud Health bill?
So
how would you?
It's not very complicated to do this integration because I already found a GitHub project that has already implemented this with Prometheus, which we already support. So there's an API in AWS. I started with AWS. I haven't checked the others, but I assume it's the same. So there's an API that you can ping and see what your billing status is. And if you do that, a few times, you can get more data and see what effects that have. So we can pull it in from Prometheus. Our first step is to document how to do that without actually connecting it to anything. But the downside about this is that you get charged 0.1 cents for every time you pull this API. So it's something that we need to think about and think about really clearly so that we don't spend more money on billing because of monitoring than the actual cost of.
So
there's
like
also a team in Configure who has cost optimization as something they own, so maybe could work with them.
Who would you say?
In Configure, there's a team called cost optimization for cloud, and they probably have something in mind also.
Okay.
So what could be cool about this experience from like a flow perspective, I could see a Slack message getting sent to a group channel saying that you're reaching your CP billing threshold. And then you click the link from Slack and it brings you into the CI/CD director dashboard where you can then look at the commit that is in a review app that is letting you see what's changing your performance. And then it also allows you to link into either Prometheus for monitoring. So it could be, like that would be a flow that I could see. And the end state is you roll back from that CI/CD director dashboard. And
yeah,
it allows
you. From there, you can do it for incident response, which also ties into to monitor and back to plan because it'll open an issue for you. But what's really, really powerful here is that if we have this data for enough releases, you can really, see the graph of over time, what's going on and how everything affects everything.
I like that. Okay. And you could look at it also if it's like connected to a release tag. This would be a production release potentially, and then it could kick off an approval workflow to a cost center that would allow you to acknowledge that these costs are going to increase prior to a production deployment. Okay. This would be a lot of work, and it would be stupid. That's perfect for 3 years, potentially 4 years. I can see this being really.
But this is exactly showing me the money. Like, I can't find a better metric.
I love it.
to show.
Yeah. Okay, I like this one too. This one's a good one for us to consider as a flow. So right now we have 2 candidates for our flow for us to spend more time. We have about 50 minutes left in scheduled time. Okay. Let's see. Support mature organizations, provider choice for navigating cross-repository multi-cloud complex releases. In this case, mature organizations was a nice word for legacy deployment workflows. So people who are not deploying to the cloud continuously or have a different waterfall method for approving deployments and trying to bring them into the modern way of releasing code. To answer your question, Jason. Or not question.
That's not really what it means, mature organizations. People might interpret it as like mature in the cloud.
Yeah, that's true.
I would just say what it is. It's okay. A lot of companies have a mix in their portfolio. So you could say something like support mature organizations. So
and really,
we were supporting legacy organizations as the provider of choice for multi-cloud.
Really, it's like it was a response to both Gartner and Forrester before we were ranked a strong performer. But again, both of those reports indicated that we're over-indexed on cloud native and we don't enable legacy organizations.
Jackie, is
so
this
maybe
like
say something like help companies that are not on the cloud yet get there?
Yeah, that's that's a better say what you mean kind of statement.
But do we mean like lift and shift here, or do we mean like helping them move to microservices architecture?
It's more like just providing them like tools to get to a place where they would be able to continuously deploy. So for example, when customers, they're looking for impacts of metrics into their deployment cycles, like DORA4 would be a helpful thing for them to get visibility into what their current model is going and the benefits that they could get by deploying into the cloud. Less lift and shift, less moving things, just more like supporting what they're doing today and showing the benefits of using cloud tools.
I think.
But from a release perspective, I just would say that giving them like visibility on the dashboards into like all of these global at scale things they may be leveraging. So for example, in the CI/CD dashboard, allowing them to select pipeline minutes, related releases, feature flags, active run books, shared environments. And this would help them kind of see across.
What you just said, like kind of sparked something for me. We have all this data for a bunch of different organizations. Maybe it would be interesting to show on a dashboard, like, here's the benchmark of organizations similar to you, like in I don't know what the criteria could be, KLOC, could be, you know, the number of projects, number of users or whatever that we have in GitLab, and then say, here is their statistics and here is how you're performing.
Yeah, this would be great. Or providing some sort of maturity index, like being like, hey, you're this mature compared to other customers of your scale and size. Yeah, I
We
like
actually
that.
have that. It's built by a team on the in Manage.
Hmm.
I can't remember what they're called, but there is a team that has that exact feature that you're describing. And there's even something built. I think one thing that I'm thinking about when we talk about this section is that it's kind of the runbooks. Everything we talk about in runbooks is relevant here, plus like some kind of just like dashboard for what are you releasing across all of your instance or across all of your groups.
Which might be
If you give
sooner
a
than.
company both of those things, then they can have a mix of things that are automated, a mix of things that are manual, and they can release them with confidence.
Yeah, I like that. So again, for me, this would be expanding more detail on the CI/CD director dashboard, allowing people to see a global view of all of their release things. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm going to be tweaking this next one, which is about like audit and compliance narrative. I need to spend more time going upstream into the compliance team's work because they have a bunch of stuff with policy that we could. I've created a couple of issues around release evidence, but for example, or going back to some of your like pre-release, how do we allow people to model impacts? We could tie that same kind of perspective to compliance and audit. Like, what are the likelihood of this release violating policies you have set in GitLab, and showing that connection. Like if you were to turn this feature flag on, this could provide a violation of a policy you have set.
This would be a fun one to make the mockups for, because I think you can get really creative and just kind of like show, you know, the whole world, all of the interesting things that we can automatically collect, just show it in some fake dashboard that as if it all already exists, and it would be really compelling, I think.
I have to tell you, Jason, I never thought I would hear fun and audit in the same sentence.
The fun of not having to collect it all, I think, is
Right.
is something that's compelling to teams. Everybody's annoyed by every company that's trying to do CD is annoyed by their audit team. And so if you give them a tool that just says like, hey, don't worry about it, we'll automatically collect everything, just like wire it up the way you normally would, and then we'll have the report ready. That's fun.
I have to tell you that I've participated in many audits, and GitLab was actually pretty easy to at least in terms of, you know, code reviews and things like that to figure out, as opposed to TFS and others.
Well, and we've got the single application, so we can really get a lot of data.
Yeah. So I could see in this case, not only like the proactive avoidance of audit problems and failures, but being able to triage those failures even in production, right? Like, so like you identify a production failure and just having that dashboard and visibility for actions. I think, Jason, is what you were.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe even like warnings as you're headed towards a release, like this issue seems out of compliance in some way, and you haven't done the release yet, so it's not an after the fact thing, but it could just be a warning on the release that something seems out of compliance.
Hi, Anna. This is kind of like the issues I created for release evidence that allows people, like, it adds a comment to the release evidence saying that this violates your 2 approval rule. We could kind of create mocks around that visual too. Here, that would fit this one.
Yeah, we're actually exploring something that kind of along that same line that I discussed with Marion today, which is like disabling feature flags, modifying feature flags in case there's like some kind of incident in production at the moment. So you, like, some people will have permissions to override that, and they would need to enter like a comment why.
I would go bigger for like a three-year vision kind of thing, but yeah.
I think basically anything that we see out of sorts in the CI/CD dashboard should like disable actions on the pipeline until you solve it in terms of a compliance or similar, if you want to go generic.
So it does sound like two of these have a very heavy CI/CD dashboard future. You know, like the CP billing one and this compliance one would just be building out sections of the CI/CD dashboard to be more compelling and actionable. Just as an observation. Okay. So this next one is around effectively managing releases naturally in GitLab. And yeah, we did make an update. Our production version of the release stage sounds better than what's written today. But the things that I've added under here are the ones that I'm currently working on with the team. And it was just more like context for where this could go. Like we're trying to add a heat map of environments so that people can see like just active environments and where they've been throughout the day. Like how often are they failing or active and available? How many are they? How time are they idle for very long? I could see that in the future, there needs to be more support or configuration around workflows. So customers are asking for ways to do non-pipeline based workflows for releases. And my expectation will be to build most of that into the dashboard and allow them to action things at scale in the dashboard without building in like an actual workflow inside of GitLab. As far as user experience goes, most of this ties into the other ones. So I'm not sure if we need to specify anything different here. And the same goes for web, API, YAML. I think the only thing that we'd want to do in our mocks is show that you can set this stuff in the UI or API. Do we want to talk about rollbacks? Mentioned a couple of things on that today.
Yeah, so this is a large effort that we're working on now, which is to stop incremental rollout or rollback on environments if a specific threshold is met. And you know, the threshold can be either predefined ones that we already have, or they can be custom. So we already talked about the fact that we're kind of connecting everything together. So we added to the environments, we're adding to the environments view alerts that you can see, and then you can take action on them. And we're talking about adding also alerts to the, actions to the alerts page, because right now it's just a long list of alerts, but you can't do anything about it. So we're talking about connecting that. And even today we talked about adding that also to the feature flags view because of the fact that we want to disable modification. So there's a lot going around about how to connect all these things together. And we also talked, the two of us, about having the environment in the environment dashboard be colored the same color as the alert, so you have visibility that something's going on. Of course, rollbacks and even stopping the deployment, these are all things that also tie into the auditing, because we want to know what's going on with our deployments. It also ties into who is allowed to press those buttons in terms of, you know, your policy and whatnot.
What do we think is like super fancy with this? Like what's like a really big idea for rollbacks?
The idea is that it's The really big idea is that you trust your system to do everything automatic for you. So if you're really nervous that you're going to break something in the deployment and now you're going to sleep and you don't want to be woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning because someone's screaming at you that production is down, the system is going to take care of it for you. That's the big idea, that, you know, GitLab does everything for you and you can have a quiet state of mind.
So we could yet again expand the CI/CD dashboard to display what are your thresholds for certain, let's say that we want to talk about security vulnerabilities, quality results, or performance, and then tying back to what you were mentioning before on like revenue or cost modeling, and it just sends out an email to a team based off of that threshold being met, that it automatically rolled it back to the last successful deployment, or however we want to.
I mean, that's just one step of it, but
I'm just trying to think about the flow that we would want to create and like how we'd create mocks for this for a 3-year vision around rollbacks. How would we realize that a rollback has happened, and how would we want a user to be?
Yeah, so Slack notifications, emails, all of that. Users that we interviewed, they wanted to get notified on production rollbacks constantly. So not only when it starts and stops, but also progress along the way, and anything that they encountered. Something that's really interesting, again, outside of the release stage, is that the monitor team, they have a bunch of dashboards that they're planning to add annotations to the dashboard. So imagine you just did a deployment and something went wrong. And now you see on your graph some kind of spike, and you can really like zoom in and see, oh, there was a deployment exactly at this moment. So you get a lot of information that you can triage and see what happened and what you can learn from it. So it's pretty cool. They also want to point you exactly to the logs, which is also really nice.
Okay. I think for the next one, advanced deployments and deployment audience and environments, from a 3-year vision perspective, what would be compelling to show?
So this kind of ties into everything we talked about, but
Yeah.
I will repeat it. So at the moment, our advanced deployments are kind of confined to Kubernetes. So we do want to expand them to non-Kubernetes users and, of course, to multi-cloud, which is a good 3-year goal because at the moment we don't really support anything non-Kubernetes. And we have partial support for AWS. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And in terms of the environment view, this is really critical because every time you choose a subset of the audience that's going to get your deployment, it's really important to visualize, to understand what is being deployed, who is getting it, in what kind of percent, and how they're performing so that you can know if you need to roll back. So this ties in nicely to the environment dashboard / environment and things like that.
So I think the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are almost duplicative bullet points on our vision page. Looking at it now, as we went through, like what would be the experience that we would want to create?
Because I added a bunch of stuff here. like it's not exactly the way the page actually looks because I added a bunch of stuff so that we could discuss during the meeting.
Okay. So from like the next 30 minutes, what I would want us to discuss is either the 3 purple bullet points that we have and kind of detail out the flow for the designers and kind of discuss what that would look like from a user experience perspective. Or we could just pick one that we'll want to go pretty deep on that we think would be the most comprehensive. Like I do think that enabling common deployment targets would be the most comprehensive one, or if we wanted to spend more time cross stage, I think that the audit compliance one could be cross stage because there's a lot of work between secure, monitor, compliance, and of course release management. What do you all think? Do you want to pick one or kind of go through the entire flow of each of the purple ones?
I'm the least excited from the audit.
Okay.
I also think it probably needs the least amount of mock-ups.
There's a lot of interesting things from a compliance policy side that we could co-create with the compliance team that would be really compelling. But if it's not super exciting for you, then I wouldn't want us to spend a lot of time talking about it in this meeting. It's something we can take offline, async. So let's spend time talking about the common deployment target flow. We have a couple of ideas here. As Jason mentioned before, like just making sure that we tie each of these ways to deploy or deployment targets back to the run books with non-automated and automated steps. That will be easy to mock up, I think. How else would we expect a user to experience this multi-cloud, multiple deployment target perspective?
From a runbook perspective?
Just globally. What are all the ways that they would interface with this part of our vision?
So again, the big idea is to make a machine for them that they just put minimal inputs and we just spin up the interfaces for them. Something that we didn't mention before, but is also really important is my goal is to leave them inside of the GitLab interface as much as possible and without going out to the different, CP consoles and stuff like that. So the more data that we can bring in and give them, visibility to what's going on is better for us.
You and I are the same mind of wanting to contain people's experience to GitLab. So that's really great.
Yeah, also something that came out from like the AWS user research that I did was people don't understand what's going on. Even if they configure everything properly and AWS says they're deploying and they get a 200 okay and everything looks fine, they don't A, trust it, B, it doesn't really mean that everything is okay. They go and do manual testing and like press the links and make sure that nothing's broken, even though everything is up and running. So any visual that we can show to help them understand the status is great.
I like the evidence reporting. Go ahead. I'm not saying anymore. My data is so, my connection is so.
Jackie, I think this can also like be a step in the run book, like how to validate that everything's fine.
I was just thinking that too. Like, there's a couple of ways that we can approach that, whether they're like manual checks or providing ways to configure automatic checks, like sort of like a syntax validator. Okay, so from the action items I have on this particular bullet point, I think I'll spend some more time pondering the 3-year vision for secrets management and what we expect to do there. All my validation for secrets management has been around the current experience with variables and where we would want to take variables and separating out secrets, as well as the HashiCorp and multi-key store support. So the ultimate like GitLab UI experience, I'm wanting to make, I wanted to reduce the barrier of entry into configuring your key store, configuring your target key store, because like Vault is super hard and challenging to configure. You have to be an expert in like what a bound claim is and set all of those particular items in order for it to work appropriately. So of course, like a big vision for me is to reduce that and make it way easy. There's also this idea of coupling HashiCorp Cloud products with the GitLab.com offering. That one's like super moonshotty because we have no idea what the HashiCorp Vault Cloud product would be, and GitLab.com performance and cost could be a factor into that. So I'll spend more time investing in what that vision should be. And then we can tie it back to enabling common deployment targets. I also think I can see 3 issues that we'll want to create to talk about a flow around a common deployment target. There's associating your template machine to a runbook, and then the creation or expansion of a runbook template for global deployment targets. I think that those could be some experiences that we could mock out here.
Yeah, some other thoughts. I don't know. Maybe I'm just an idiot for saying this, but are we converting like runbooks into code? Like you just write something simple and we translate it into YAML?
So there's two paths that I have, building out our Jupyter experience. And then the other one is being able to execute scripts from Markdown. So we would be having like a GitLab native runbook store. So the things I need to investigate on that is if we support runbook storage, is that increasing storage costs for our customers? And would that be like an adoption hindrance for them? Or is this really just like another YAML file that lives inside their repository? And these files, like examples I've received from customers on how their runbooks look today, they can be really expansive and they can have hundreds and hundreds of runbooks and contingencies and different deployment plans. So what I've been really concentrating on is our runbooks in GitLab and the different series of runbooks that we have, and looking at recreating those experiences to support our delivery team. And then we could look at expanding if it's just a repository file or not.
Okay, and the second thing that I wanted to ask is, when we have some kind of runbook, do we have webhooks that trigger the pipeline, which is a nice way to connect it as well?
Yes, yeah, this whole idea of executing scripts from Markdown would be so that you can trigger pipelines and trigger potential deployments. Because I imagine that if we start coupling more deployment approvals as a part of a runbook step, that they may trigger a pipeline up through a certain point and then ends up being a manual job to then approve a pipeline deployment.
What kind of syntax does a runbook have?
They're super varied. There's a lot of different tools that people are leveraging for runbooks. Runbook is like a generic term of a collection of documents. So like you can have a series of scripts, and then Jason probably actually knows more about this actually. But as far as the ones that I've seen with customers, is that they'll have like a block of code that they'll run as like a preparation. For example, I'm going to prepare my environment for a deployment. And then I have a step that says I need to notify marketing to send this email pre-deployment. And then I'm going to run another script and then run some tests. And then once I receive a passing result, I will perform some more manual actions, and then it gets handed off to another team. And they can be hundreds of thousands of steps long in some cases.
You got it.
I know that didn't really directly answer your question, but I've seen it being like a mixture of SQL, text, YAML, Ruby, Java, because sometimes they kick off application code, like there's scripts for that too. Python.
Is there anything that kind of ties it together? Like you can have scripts of all kinds, like
job security.
A person does. Typically they're running those scripts, or they have like a machine that with an IAM permission that goes in and like with like a run deck server and runs those scripts on behalf of a person.
Yeah, I mean, like you can think of our, a good example I think is our new hire checklist. That's a runbook essentially. And then you can make them more fancy by like, imagine adding a button to it that if you clicked on it, it automatically ran some script. But at its core, it's just like a long list of bullet items with checkboxes.
Like asset links were important to add to the release page because people just wanted to be able to link their release plan, which is a runbook. Like it's an Excel document that has a series of steps that they wanted to link to a particular release.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So we can start creating some issues for this one and working asynchronous on that. Sound okay, Ori? Okay. Any questions? I'm going to give Hayana and Dimitri some time to ask questions, as I think that this will probably be the one that will decompose and work for cross-stage mocks on. And then hopefully we'll go from there, or cross-group mocks.
I think it would be nice to sit with Dimitri and then just brainstorm also, maybe regroup and see from all the information that we consume today, what can be the low-hanging fruits, and see if we can put this, the workflow, at least some visuals together to then start a conversation async. So it would be nice to have a starting point for what the flow would look like in the UI. So, what do you think, Dimitri?
Yeah, I agree. I would love like a Figma document where we kind of pull in visuals of existing UIs and kind of like write down our ideas on little notes or however we want, and kind of, create some coherent where we can look at it from a bird's eye perspective. Right now, it's a lot of text, a lot of abstractness. I would love to see some visuals get into this picture to kind of loosen us up a little bit into creating, mock-ups that come out of that.
Here, I'm going to add to the document as well. I created a Figma file. Yeah, I'm not sure if everyone has access to it, if product managers have Figma accounts, but I think it will be fun and useful if everyone could, in the future contribute to the same file, because then we can just make the changes.
Where did you put that file?
She just chatted it here.
I'm going to add that to the agenda.
It looks like I can access it, so I don't see any problem.
But can you edit?
I can edit it.
Okay, cool. Perfect.
Thank you, Hannah, for creating that. Really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm off for the rest of the day, but I will create these issues first thing tomorrow and ping you all on it. We'll have an epic called Release Stage Mocks, and then a sub epic for this particular story. And then I think we can work asynchronously, maybe get some prototypes together, and then we can review as a team those prototypes. That will be our next sync meeting to be efficient with our time. Sound good?
Yep.
Nice job, everybody.
Thank you.